Hi, this is Lou Ann Worley with Rockin Book Reviews, and I'm so happy to be here today with Felice Zaslow. Is that right?
Correct.
Felice, you are an artist as well as an author. Have you always lived in Long Island?
No, I have not. I've lived in Long Island since 1975. And my husband and I moved in when I was very pregnant with my eldest son. Before that, the early years of our marriage, we lived in Queens, New York, and I grew up in Brooklyn, born and bred. I'm a New Yorker all my life.
From what I understand, that's a pretty good thing to be.
It's interesting.
My daughter lived in Long Island for a couple of years as a nanny.
Oh.
And then another daughter lived there for 2 years, mostly in Albany and Rochester. And
Albany and Rochester is, that's upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not where I am. I'm of Kennedy Airport, if you can picture it.
Okay.
Yes, and Long Island is kind of an extension of Brooklyn and Queens. Yeah, but it's a suburb.
Yeah, that's what my daughter loved about Long Island. She had the smaller, more of a community effect. And then she was so close to New York City. So.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You are, like I mentioned, you are an artist. And is that what you taught in school?
Just somewhat. I spent most of my career teaching 6th grade in a middle school. I always loved to create art. I always loved to read and write. And I was prepared to teach English when I graduated. I had a major in English in college and 2 minors, one in secondary education and the other in art. I never could decide on English and art. And then I took the New York City license exam for elementary school where I could combine all my loves.
Oh,
and
great.
That was more creative for me, yeah.
And that's a kind of a rough age to teach.
So everyone says, however, when they're in 6th grade, they're the babies in the school. So it wasn't rough at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were a New Yorker. So tell us a few things about your life growing up and how many siblings you had, your favorite activities, a couple of memories that have had an impact in your life.
Oh, I have many. I'll try to be selective. So mostly growing up, I could be found on roller skates or some other activity with a lot of movement. And I was always fast, always won races. I loved that kind of stuff. I liked to dance. I also spent long hours in my room reading and making clothes for my dolls. And I have one younger sister. We grew up in a housing project. I know that may sound not good, but at that time it was. There were many of those built after World War II to house the people returning with their families. And the neighborhood I grew up in Brooklyn was very diverse. So I'm of Jewish background, but I had friends of all kinds. And it was a wonderful way to grow up. It was the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, the world. I loved school and elementary school, and my 5th grade teacher is partially responsible for me becoming a writer and getting my book out. His name was Mr. Uni. He's passed away now, but he had one of those talents for seeing his students and recognizing their strengths. And he kept telling me to keep writing. You're so creative. You're doing a great job. He wrote in my autograph book, dated until Felice becomes America's #1 best-selling author. And that made an impact on me. And the following year in 6th grade, and also I loved teaching because I have great memories of my teachers in those years. Not so much later on. But in 6th grade, at graduation, I received a medal for Americanism and patriotism for an essay I wrote, and it was from John F. Kennedy, Well, probably signed by a secretary or something.
Yeah,
But
but
many,
still.
many students across the country won that. And I kept that. And it was very, very special time in my life. And this essay I wrote was through the eyes of an innocent young girl who could trust her environment, could go safely to school. I had family and extended family around, and lots of support and neighbors. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood where everybody's mother was watching everybody's kids.
Um,
Yeah. So, oh, Felice, you want me to tell your mother later? That kind of thing. But it was wonderful. We felt safe and good. And summers, we went to the beach a lot, and when a whole bunch of kids were loaded up into somebody's, what was that called? Station wagon. You
mhm.
know, we go with the mothers during the week to the beach, stayed outside playing. There were always kids outside to play with. It was a wonderful way to grow up. And I lived there until the night before my wedding in April of 1970.
Great.
Yeah, I was pretty much a child bride.
Oh, that's
Not really.
wonderful, though.
So, in my book, From Here, Lessons in Love and Loss from 9/11, um, which of course is a very deeply serious subject, I opened it in the prologue with the essay I wrote in sixth grade to
Mhm.
show the irony, you know, of what happens when I grew up. And my artwork was included. This is my copy. It's not for resale. It's one of those author copies, yeah, that I had approved. But this photo on the cover was taken by me at the beach this
Oh,
summer.
wow.
And my
You
book
did a
designer,
great job.
thank you, my book designer was able to incorporate it. I had several photos, and the beach is a theme in my story. It runs throughout the book. Long Island has some of the world's most beautiful beaches.
I didn't know that.
Unfortunately, can't, oh, they're gorgeous. We have lots of sand. The North Shore of Long Island has rocky beaches. Where I live on the South Shore, they're sand beaches. And for me, there's nothing more glorious than walking early in the morning along the beach.
We lived in Panama City, Florida for a
Oh,
while, and right off the beach. And that's the way it was, the beautiful white sand. It was wonderful. I can
and
relate. Makes me homesick.
and there's something very healing and comforting to me as sitting at the ocean. You know, it's a
Oh, I
place I've
agree.
gone to many times throughout my life for peace and going within.
Yeah, I agree. I love the beaches. Was there any other really special memory of someone who had an impact or something that had an impact in your life?
Yeah, I have a little. I have some. I don't do it professionally. I have used it for myself and to help people with some psychic and mediumistic ability. And my mother, late in her life, finally admitted that things I told her about people were true, because she was a very practical woman. She wanted to raise us
Mhm.
well and get us off to school and do this and that and the whole thing. But my grandmother, her mother, would always give me a wink. So, you know, acknowledging it, validating, you're right on there, my girl. My grandma Dora, God bless her, may she rest in peace, and we were very close. Um, but I had many experiences over my life, and I think maybe my next book will be about that. And I go in that direction only via God. That if this is okay with God, it's okay with me. I think there's so much more to the human mind,
Oh,
to human
yes.
beings than just what we see. And my story opens up when I am 16 on the beach and with a bunch of girlfriends, not protecting our skin very well. Those were the days of baby oil and iodine. And we used to put that streaky thing in our hair, you know. It was the 60s. Okay. And one of my friends said, you know, we were always looking out for cute boys. And one of my friends said, wow, look at him, and I said, who? And there was Ira, my future husband, coming out of the water, who looked like a Greek god to me at that time. And I had a knowing that we were meant to be together. But I was 16. What was I going to do about it? As it turned out, he dated two of my friends, and I was paired with his cousin David, who had the
Oh, wow.
misfortune of following him out of the water. David was just as handsome and very charming. And then this went on for the summer, and being kids, we all went our separate ways in the fall, back to school and responsibility and all that. And 3.5 years later, I met Ira again at a dance, and that's when he knew. And he told his friend Neil, "That's the girl I'm going to marry."
Oh,
And we,
neat.
isn't it? Yeah, I once dragged him to the Rhine Institute in North Carolina where they did ESP testing. He liked to go with me. I was always dragging him on these little adventures. And as long as he could play paddleball and eat pizza and do his thing, because he worked hard all week, he indulged me a lot of the times. And I said, well, I want to be tested here. I said, why don't you do it too? Well, he did better than I did. Much to my dismay. And then we had a very, I'd say, traditional married life. I have two sons, Brian and Adam. They're 47 and 44 now, with families of their own. And things went, I worked hard. I didn't work far from home at my teaching job. And he commuted into Manhattan and then Jersey City and then back to Manhattan. And when they
What was
moved,
his occupation?
originally, when I first met him, he was a linear programmer, then a systems analyst. And Mobil Oil, who he worked for in the early days, was moving to Virginia. And we opted not to go. He said, I'm going to get a consulting job. He went back for an MBA, and he became a business consultant for Salomon Brothers for a few months, which is now Salomon Smith Barney, an investment firm. And then his next consulting job was with Lehman Brothers. And he didn't want to remain a consultant. He decided he wanted the security of full time. So he was hired there full time. And when his group moved back to the city, they originally were in the World Financial Center. Then the group had to go to Jersey City across the water. He moved back. I said, oh, you're back at the financial center? He said, no, the trade center. And we were sitting in a diner when he told me, and I felt my stomach drop. I just had a premonition type feeling. And he looked at me and he said, I know I'm not thrilled about it either, but at least I'll be back in Manhattan. And it was fine for a while. And then suddenly that day came, September 11th of 2001, which changed all of our lives.
I can't imagine how devastating.
I
How
hope you
long was
should
it before
never.
you knew anything?
That day, I was teaching, it was a Tuesday, and I got a call in my classroom, and I asked a student to pick up the phone. I was in the middle of a lesson, and he said, Mrs. Zaslow, they want you in the main office. There's a call for you. I said, well, all right. I went to the phone. I said, could you please put it through? Because usually that's what they did. And the secretary said, no, we need you to come up. I'm thinking, what on earth? And I went to the office, and it was buzzing with people. And my son Brian was on the phone. He was on his way from Manhattan to Jersey City for a callback interview to accept a job he was offered. He was on the ferry, and he said, Mom, a plane just hit Dad's tower. And it didn't register. I thought maybe it was one of those small private planes, because that had happened before. And
Oh,
if you're
really?
ever
I
at
didn't know that.
oh yeah, and if you ever went way up at the Trade Center, I was at Windows on the World, which was a restaurant at the top, very fine restaurant. You can look out and look down, and there'd be helicopters flying around and small planes, which was a very strange sight. Yeah. And I said, oh, it's probably one of those small planes. He goes, no, it didn't look like it. I said, okay, Brian, just go for your interview and we'll touch base again. in a little while. And I hung up, and it was just a very strange moment. I don't think I went back to my classroom. I think they sent somebody to cover me. And the principal turned the TV on in his office and invited me to come in and sit down. And a school aide brought me a glass of water. And there was another woman, Cheryl, whose husband was a firefighter, and he perished as well. He was Ira and her husband both went missing. And I remember going home, and Kathy, a friend of mine, came and brought me some food. And then a couple of hours went by, and Adam came home, my younger son, and my friends Martha and Jesse, a couple, came over. Martha had finished her day teaching and knew what to do with the waiting period. And they stayed over that night. And then by the morning, still nothing. It took 10 days for me to accept that he wasn't coming home. I wouldn't leave any stone unturned.
That had to have been horrific.
It was very, I was in go mode, and people would say, what can I do? What would you like me to do? And all I could say is find Ira, and I admit there was some people trapped in the PATH train underground, which came from New Jersey, between Manhattan and Jersey. And so there was talk that there may have been people trapped there, all kinds of things. I was imagining he got clocked on the head. He's wandering around, and he was a very, from my perspective and many others, gorgeous guy. Quieter than me. Otherwise, I would have been very worried to be married to someone like that. But I maybe got clocked on the head, and some woman picked him up and brought him home. And then he'd come around and say, oh, I better call Felice, And it turned out in a trade center support group, a month or two later, a whole bunch of other women had that same fantasy.
Oh, really?
I guess it's a way of coping with the craziness. We had no role models. Who was a role model for a 9/11 family member? A Holocaust survivor?
Yeah.
Or anybody living, where in mass murders of some kind and searching for their relatives? I really had no role models, but that did send me on a long soul-searching journey. Throughout the whole process, my husband was always very proud of my teaching career and my writing, and I always kept journals. So I had 7 journals throughout first time period, which eventually became my first manuscript.
It took over a decade to write your book. Was it because it was the adjustment period, or
okay?
Tell us.
Yes, it was more involved than that. The first manuscript was finished in May of 2003.
Oh,
yes, and I didn't have I have basically the same manuscript now, and I had an opportunity to publish with a small press, but I was by no means ready to take it on the road, so to speak. I knew, and I also was counseled to know, that I had to rebuild my life. I had to rediscover me, had to live through many experiences before I did that. Otherwise, I'd be all about wearing the coat of the 9/11 widow. And that's not who I am. That's something that happened to me. I'm Felice, with many roles. And so I went on a great soul searching journey. I wanted to know why, and how could this happen, and what all the world religions had to say about it. I almost became an interfaith minister. And I was accepted to this program, and it was 2 years, and I was still teaching, and there was no way I could have done it after work. I bought all the books and I read a lot. And I spoke at the local synagogue on the 10th anniversary about my journey since. And I said, I came back to what I inherently knew. And that is, we won't have the answers to why there exists such evil until we get where we're going. Exactly. And I made jokes and said, that's the great mystery. And you have to have faith. And so there's, besides the beach, the theme of spirituality runs through my book, and that helped me tremendously. A belief in the afterlife, a strong faith in God. Ever since I was very little, I always prayed outside of an institution. I always prayed when I was a little tiny girl, the physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological health and well-being of my family. And my sister used to make fun of me. She said, "Oh, you're praying again?" I said, "Yeah." But it served me in my life. And it is my dearest wish that people who read my book, who may be going through a dark night of the soul, will get comfort and hope from it, because there's always another way to look at things. Sometimes it takes a lot of work, sometimes a little work. Anyway, over the years, many people read it. Carolyn Mace, who's a spiritual teacher, Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor. His books were published in France because that's where he went after the war, and he encouraged me to circulate it around. He's passed away now. My daughter-in-law, Natalie, was at Boston University at the time, not yet my daughter-in-law, but she hunted him down for me, and he was a
Oh,
professor there. Yeah.
how wonderful.
Yeah. So I have a lovely letter from him, and then other people as well. And I pretty much stalked Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People. He's pretty prolific. He's written many other books as well, but he was speaking at a spa in Arizona, and I love the Southwest. I'm very drawn there. So once a year or so, I try to get out there. And wherever I went, I would bring my manuscript with me because I felt, well, you never know, somebody might be interested. And I spoke with him afterward, and he said, "I would have counseled you after 9/11 had I known you to do exactly what you did, and that is to document everything, write a book if that you're so drawn to do that, and rebuild your life and focus on your family." And he wrote me a beautiful letter too, and I probably would have gotten a nice review from him. But when I was ready to publish, his wife had just passed away. That was this summer, and he was pretty ill. So respectfully, I let him be. Yeah, but my book's gotten great reviews, and I'm very, very delighted that I have put it out into the world. And I was influenced, believe it or not, by the style of Katie Couric's memoir, Going There, which she published recently, which has nothing whatsoever, except her young husband, died of colon cancer. But her book was more about the business she was in. But she had really catchy chapter titles. And so I decided that's a great idea. And she incorporated some photos, family photos, and I did the same. Rabbi Kushner said, "I would encourage you to self-publish your book for family and friends who knew Ira," because he, in his words, he had to quote unquote bastardize his story in order to make it saleable for a big publishing company. And there's no way, I'm too creatively independent that I would ever want to do that. This to me I'm blessed to have had the ability to do it and make it of quality. And it's my gift to the world. It's help. I'm getting some beautiful letters from people.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful gift. And I agree with you on so many issues. And I lost my daughter in 2003. She was starting at the university and she hit black ice and she started spinning, and a truck ran over her and she was killed instantly. And I thought then, how does a parent or a wife or anything deal with pain like that if they didn't have a belief in the hereafter? That is what gave me the greatest solace, knowing very, very assuredly, feeling that I would see her again and be with her again. So,
From what I understand, from all the studying I've done, is that the other side, the spiritual world, is right next to us. It's just another dimension, and they are here. And maybe you've even had signs, but that's probably a conversation for another time. But I have experienced that. In fact, my next project will probably be something about that, because this book does not focus on those issues, those beliefs I have or experiences. It just hints at it a little bit.
I've had
So
some very special experiences too, and I
Good.
believe with all my heart. I mean,
Yeah.
from these experiences, I can say I really know that there's life after death, but that's kind of
Yes.
hard for some people to accept. But in the month of January, I'm centering most of my blog themes on healing and improving your life and mental, physical health. And this is just perfect. It's just,
Thank you.
it couldn't have been more perfect.
I sure hope so. That's my goal. Sometimes things happen and they're meant to be, you know. Oh,
But we don't know the big picture.
no, we don't, and we won't know. We're not supposed to know. It's the
No.
great mystery.
I think it's, just being patient, waiting for, like you said, our time.
But making the most of the life you have while you're here.
So tell us briefly a little bit about your book. You pretty much sold it, but tell us just a little bit more.
A little bit more. So it took 10 days before I accepted that he truly was not coming back. And the Lehman Brothers people came to the house and they had hired the Bo Dietl Detective Agency, really big agency in Manhattan, to track his whereabouts that morning. And they found emails from Ira, and back and forth with colleagues, phone messages, all that kind of stuff. And it was deduced that he went on his usual morning routine to the Sky Cafeteria. Lehman's offices were on a low floor, maybe 28 or somewhere around there. He had to go up a couple of flights in the elevator, walk across the hall to another elevator bank, and go down a little bit to the Sky Cafeteria, which was his habit. He was tall and lean, could eat whatever he wanted, low cholesterol, and they had great
disgusting
pumpkin.
how they can do that.
He probably still could if he was here today, better than me. And he loved the pumpkin muffins there. And he loved to chit chat with the people who worked there. You become friends. We see people every day. And so even though a friend insisted on him staying on the floor that morning, but he wouldn't do it. I guess that friend had some sense. And everybody got out but Ira. And he was he was in the elevator when the plane hit.
Oh, wow.
Some rescue workers got a bunch of them out of the elevator, and they were eventually found in a stairwell. So I was there that day. My son Adam was with me. My friend Howie, my very close friend Marilyn's husband, was my only retired friend, so he came over. And the local rabbi and the Lehman Brothers people. And I had to accept he wasn't coming back. And then we planned this magnificent memorial service with a cast of thousands, broadcast it to relatives in Florida and here and there. And then in late October, I was walking on the boardwalk on a lunch break with my two colleagues, left my cell phone in the car, and had an urge to call home. And I did. And another indication of that tuned in this. And my son Adam said, "Mom, where are you? Your principal's out looking for you." They found Dad's body. So my first prayer when I accepted that he wasn't coming back 10 days later was, "Please, God, please let me have him back so we can have a funeral and I can have something of his." And I was given that.
Wow.
We had a funeral right after that. And then the real grief kicked in, unlike any other grief I ever felt. I'm sure you could identify, but it was, in a way, it was horrible, but it was healthier than being in that limbo state. Like the women, they have those widows' walks. There's always ghost stories about women who are out there waiting for their husband to come home from an ocean voyage. Yeah. And that was a very, very uncomfortable place to be in, that limbo state. And then I grieved. I had a lot of support around me and friends, but they don't come home with you at night. And I knew I had to rebuild my life. I was 52 at the time, and I dated. That was interesting. And I have a lot of humor in the book as well regarding that, and advice from other widowed women. One, my late mother's late friend Rose, who was a sketch, who I love to talk to her because she had me hysterical laughing. And I moved forward in my life. And since then, there was a wedding and there were 3 grandchildren born and a long-term relationship. And
I know a lot of people feel guilty about dating, especially, if it hadn't been a long time, but I think it's the most healthy thing to do to at least get that companionship, that feeling of yourself again.
yeah, well, wasn't right away, but it was important. And I was young, and my husband would have, and I wrote in the book, he was too generous of spirit to want me not to have a full
Right.
life.
He
And
won't
also for
want
the
your
sake of
happiness. Yeah.
and for the sake of my sons as well. I didn't want them worrying about me. They were young men just in their 20s, just starting out in the world. They didn't need to be thinking about their mother alone, lonely on Long Island. Yeah.
Well, I think it's wonderful, and I admire you for what you've done and the way you've picked up your life, and you're now helping others who have experienced similar situations.
Thank you. I'd like to add one more thing. Another thing that propelled me to publish recently are the things that go on in this world. Those school shootings. As a grandparent, a parent, a teacher, a person, that really got to me. And then the war in Ukraine and all sorts of, and a COVID crisis, people dying left and right. So I feel that my story and how I got through is as relevant today for
There's
those
a great
reasons.
need. There's a great
Yeah.
need for uplifting and hope, and you've filled that bill.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to your next book.
That'll be a while, but I'm having fun promoting this, actually. As you can see, I enjoy speaking.
Oh, well, you're delightful to speak with. So
Thank you. So are you. I enjoyed this
thank
very much.
you. And we have a giveaway.
Mhm.
We'll be giving away a print copy of your book to one lucky US Canada winner. Have you got any final comments before we close?
No, but I'll be happy to sign the copy
Super. Okay.
and wish everybody a happy, healthy holiday season.
Thank you. And same to you.
Thanks for having me.
And we will sign off now, and we hope that all of you will search the universe through books. Goodbye now.